Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Hello and Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. Today's DAF is KIDDUSHIN. DAF Daled, we are holding 6 lines from the top. Now we're looking for a source to the halacha that one can be mekadesh an isha using money or something that has value, like a ring, which is today's practice. So yesterday we had a pasuk actually which is stated elsewhere regarding an amma ha'ivriya. So you have a Jewish maidservant sold by her father to this owner. Once she attains adulthood, pasuk says she leaves free of charge. V'yatza chinam ein kasef. Now that seems to be a redundancy. She leaves free, for free. Ein kasef, no money, no charge. Pretty much a repetition. So we learned from there that actually this will teach us that you can be mekadesh and isha with kasef. How? What does one have to do with the other? The pasuk is saying, look, when she leaves this master, it's no charge, it's for free. There's no payment necessary. But when she leaves a different owner, a different boss, her father, when she leaves his domain, his rishus, his jurisdiction, she gets married, there is money changing hands. So you see that the transfer of money can make an kinyan kiddushin on the isha. Okay, that was yesterday's sugya. The Gemara today will ask on that drasha. Okay, so we got up to 6 lines from the top. V'hai v'yatza chinam. This pasuk of v'yatza chinam ein kasef is coming to teach you this halacha, that one can be mekadesh an isha. He can acquire an isha for the sake of marriage through kasef, through money. Lahachi da'asa, is that the purpose of this pasuk? Look at this sanya. We already used this pasuk. We need it for elsewhere, for a different drasha. The sanya. And this is a halacha that pertains, specifically to an amma ha'ivriya. V'yatza chinam elo yimei bagrus, ein kasef elo yimei narus. When does she leave her owner? When does the amma ha'ivriya go free? V'yatza chinam tells you elo yimei bagrus, when she reaches full adulthood. That's the point of 12 and a half years of age. Ein kasef tells you elo yimei narus, when she reaches the preliminary stage of adulthood, which is 12 years old, and she exhibits signs of maturity and pubic hairs, etc. And soon, actually, the Gemara will ask, one second, once she's gone at 12, how could she still be there at 12 and a half? We'll deal with that later. So bottom line is, all expressions, all words in this pasuk are needed for the sake of this halacha of indicating to us when an amma ha'ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, goes free. There's nothing available for our halacha of being mekadesh and isha with kasef. So there's no redundancy. It's all needed for that sake. Amar Ravina, I'll tell you how we learn both things from the same pasuk. Imkain, because if it's only coming to teach you when she leaves her owner, whether it's narus or bagrus, lemakra ein kasef. We don't need a yud in there. You can have the same meaning without the yud. Aleph nun. My ein kasef. Why add the yud? That's an added drasha. Ein kasef ladin zeh, which will teach us our drasha. There's no money changing hands when she leaves his domain. Aval yesh kasef ladin acher, but we do give kasef to another boss, another owner, another master, i.e., her father, when he accepts the kasef kiddushin, when he marries her off. Umaniu, who's that other boss? Av, that's the father. So one pasuk can teach us many things. A, when does she leave her master? Amma ha'ivriya, when does she go free? Ein kasef yimei na'arus, when she becomes a nara at 12. Sorry, v'yatza chinam is nara. Ein kasef is, I get mixed up, but v'yatza chinam, that's bagrus, when she turns 12 and a half. Ein kasef is narus. Right, so that's one thing. And then we have the added drasha. The ein with a yud tells you, well, there's no money being transferred in this case. She goes free, totally free, without charge. But in a different instance, when she leaves one's domain, i.e. her father's domain, there is a possibility of kesef changing hands. A transfer of kesef makes that kiddush. Now, how do we know that this is a valid, drasha? The yud, when ma'idid arshin and hachi, how do you know that this is a valid drasha? The Sanya, we find it elsewhere in a brisa, which discusses the halacha as follows. Anisha from a Kohen family, she was a daughter of a Kohen, who was able to have truma. She married a non-Kohen, a Yisrael, and then he died, he divorced her, and she's back home. She reverts back to her earlier status in terms of her ability to eat truma, provided there's no connection to her new husband in terms of children. So if there are any children from a new husband that she has, that makes her sort of identify with her Yisrael husband and his family, in which case she's prevented from eating truma. Now, when we say children, what about if she has no actual children anymore from him? It's just a grandchild that survived. Or let's say, she has a grandchild, but he's a mamzer. Does that count? Does that prevent her from having truma when she goes back home? The Sanya, yeah, all qualify. Vizera Einla. She only goes back home and has truma if there are no children that she has from this new husband. Einla Lazara, perhaps only actual children. What about a grandchild? Zera Zara Minayin, Tamalaymar, Zera Einla. Oh, the Yud tells you Ayin Lo. Pay attention, investigate. Bima Ayin. If there's some descendant, even if it's not an actual first generational child, even if it's a second generation, it's a grandchild, that also works. That also has the same effect. Next question. Maybe it's only valid children, only high standard kosher children. What about zera pasal manayim? What if she had a mamzer, a grandchild from this husband? Zera einla, again, ayin la. Any type of descendant, even a mamzer. Bottom line, we see that we focus on the yud to add more halachas. The same thing in our sugya. Ein kasef tells you the halacha that we're looking for. Now, in this brisa, we pretty much learned two things from the same diuk. The extra yud was already applied and used for grandchildren. And then we go and use the same drasha to tell you a mamzer. Answer. You know what? We don't really need a pasuk for grandchildren. Grandchildren are like children. The bnei banim, harihin kebanim. The Torah regards a grandchild like a child, and Rashi brings the Gemara in Yevamos, where we learn that idea from. So we don't really need a drasha from that. We mentioned it just, by the way, but it doesn't really require a pasuk. Ki itra kra, we do need a pasuk for lezera pasal, for the mamzer. Now, we found a precedent. We found that the Tana elsewhere, in fact, employs the same system, the same method of drasha with the extra yud. But V'tana gufei menali d'darishachi, how did the Tana himself know that's a valid drasha? Where else do we find? Where else in the Torah can you find an expression of no and negativity without a yud? Amri, so the Bnei Yeshiva said, we found at least two examples of negation without the yud. Apparently the yud is not necessary, and if there is a yud, there's an extra added meaning. Number one, ksiv me'ein bilam. Bilam refused. Me'ein bilam. And it leaves out the yud. And also me'ein yavami. He refuses to do the yibum, he only wants, right? The lo ksiv b'hu yud, there's no yud. Apparently it can go without the yud as well. Vacha ksiv be'yud, and by us, we have the yud, shma mino. That's a raya l'drasho d'asa. It's coming to teach you an added layer of meaning, added layer of halach. Okay, so bottom line is, we know that an Isha is miskadesh with kesef, and the kesef goes to her father, based on this drasha, v'yatzachinim and kesef, that there's no money being transferred in this case, but there is money transferred elsewhere, i.e. when she leaves her father's jurisdiction, through the process of kiddushin, money accomplishes that, and money is handed to her father. Now, if you recall, yesterday we had a drasha that teaches us that the any earnings that his daughter earns goes to her father as well, provided she's underage. So why do we need a pasuk to tell you that the Masi Yadayim, her earnings go to her father, as well as a pasuk that the money received in exchange for the Masa Kiddushin goes to her father as well? It's all one and the same idea. Any income on her behalf goes to the father. Why do we need two psukim? Yes, we need a pasuk that the Kiddushin money goes to her father. Likewise, another pasuk that her earnings, whatever she makes, goes to her father. Each one has a chiddush. You couldn't learn one from the other. If you only speak about the Kiddushin go to her father, I would say it makes sense because she didn't expend much effort. She didn't work for that money, so it goes to the father. But something that she earned, that she worked for, perhaps it's fear that it goes to her and not to the father. That's why we need a pasuk that the father gets that. And likewise, in the reverse, had we only discussed her earnings going to her father, I would say, you know what, it makes sense. After all, he's feeding her. She's being supported by her father. And, he's thinking, look, fair deal, I support you, I get your earnings. He's expecting it. He knows it's coming on a monthly basis. He expects to get her check. But the moment that she gets for Kiddushin, that's not something anticipated. It's not a regular income that he's expecting. The Ma'al Muka'asila is just coming from elsewhere. Perhaps that's not part of the configuration, and she can keep it tzricha. No, the pasuk lets us know, in both situations, any earnings, whether it's Masi Yadayim or Kiddushin, all to the father. Now let's go back to that pasuk by Amma ha'ivriya, Jewish maidservant sold to this owner. Pasuk says, as soon as she reaches adulthood, whether it's na'aras, which is 12 years old, or bagras, 12 and a half, she goes free. And we had this question before. Once you're at 12, once you're gone, you can't go free at 12 and a half again. You're no longer here. Why do we need a pasuk for each one? Okay, so next Gemara will deal with that. Gufa, let's go back and review. Pasuk says, v'yatzachinam, Elu Yimei Bagrus, that's the time of Bagrus. Ein Kasef, Elu Yimei Naras, that's the time of Naras. Why do we need two psukim? Belichta Rechmona Naras. Let the pasuk just speak about her going out at 12. V'lo Yimei Bagrus, and speaking about Bagrus is totally unnecessary. She's out, she's gone, she's free. Amar Rabba, Ba'zeh v'lim nazeh. You need both psukim because the drasha, which tells you that she leaves at Bagrus at 12 and a half, is pretty much indicating to us that the other pasuk, the other drasha, refers to Na'arus. You see, because the pasuk doesn't explicitly state one or the other. It doesn't say the word Na'arus or Bagrus. It says V'yatzachinim en kasef. You have to almost guess what's going on what. So perhaps if there would be only one drasha instead of two, I would say, yeah, she leaves at 12 and a half. That's why we need two psukim, Yatzachinam and Ein Kasef. One is to tell you Bagrus, and one, which is now available for Narus, tells you that she leaves at Narus. So you're right, once she's out at 12, she's no longer going to be here to experience 12 and a half under his ownership, under his jurisdiction. But it's inevitable. You need two psukim. Otherwise, you would just say, well, one pasuk, 12 and a half. But now that you have two psukim, one is going on 12, and now you know that she's leaving at 12. The pasuk of 12 and a half tells you the other pasuk, which is now available for 12, tells you she leaves at 12. And we find a similar configuration regarding a different drasha. We seem to have a duplication, but really there's a purpose, as we said before, because otherwise you wouldn't know what's what. Okay, there's something called Toisha v'Sachar, which we'll see in the next brayso. There as well, we need two psukim to provide clarity. The Sanya, Toisha v'Zakanoi Kinyan Olam. Pasuk says, if you own an Evet Kanani, a non-Jewish slave, he's like your asset, like your possession, in which case if you're a Kayan, you can feed him teruma. But if it's a Evet Ivri, a Yiddish slave, so whether he's a short-term slave, a temporary slave who goes out, at Shemitah, or perhaps he's already settled in, he's a Toishav, he refused to leave, and as we learned in the beginning of Pashas Mishpatim, he bore his earlobe, etc., and he's now settled until Yovel. That's a sort of a long-term, permanent proposition. Either way, you don't really own him. He's just serving you. He's committed to serve you. But you don't actually have, physical ownership of his physical self. In both cases, you cannot feed him truma. And we have one pasuk which says Toshav, right? Toshav Kohen, and then the pasuk says V'sacher. Says the Brisa, Toshav Zakanu Kinyan Olam. That's a fellow who's permanently embedded in your household. He's staying there until Yovel. Sacher, that's going on a different fellow. Zakanu Kinyan Shanim. He's only there, for a number of years until Shemitah. In both cases, you cannot feed them truma. And the question is, well, isn't this a redundancy? Once you know that the long-term fellow is not entitled, of course the short-term fellow is not entitled either. Why the repetition? Yoimar Toshav. Let the pasuk simply state that a Toshav, a permanent fellow, cannot have truma. Yoimar Sacher. There's no need to speak about the Sacher. It's obvious. I'll conclude on my own. Look, if the permanent fellow cannot eat truma, certainly doesn't it lend to reason that the short-term fellow cannot either? Why mention both? On that, the Brisa answers, I'll tell you why. To provide clarity. If we only mention one expression, let's say we say Toshav, right? I would say, you know what? Who says Toshav means a permanently embedded fellow, a long-term servant? Toshav Zakanu Kinyan Shanim. I would say no. Toshav means a person that's living with you, but it's just temporary until Shemitah. So he can't eat because he's only there temporarily. But a fellow, even if he's an Evet Ivri, but he's there for a long term, perhaps he can have your truma. That's why we need two psukim. Ba sacher, believe it al Toshav. So comes the pasuk and adds the word sacher, and Toshav, and it's indicating to you what Toshav means. That sacher is obviously a different fellow than a Toshav. So it must be sacher is a temporary fellow, and Toshav is a more permanent fellow. Toshav means he's, miyushav, he's settled, he's there long term. Bas sacher, so the word sacher is indicative of the definition of Toshav, and tells you that whether you're here short term or long term, even if he's meant to stay long term, he will not have his truma. So just like there, we have two psukim which seem to be redundant and repetitious, but there's a reason and meaning here as well. By the Amma Ivriya, she goes out as a Nara, she goes out as a Begeres, even though once she leaves at 12, she's not here for 12 and a half, but we need both psukim to indicate one on the other, meaning that we know that it's not just a Begeres, but even a Nara leaves, but you're right, once she leaves at Nara, she's gone. Amalei Abaye responds to Rabba's correlation between our Sugya and Toshav V'sacher. How can you compare the two things? Midami. You see, Hasam Trei Gufininu, the case of the Eved, one owner can theoretically have a Toshav in his house and a Sacher in his house, two separate people. Right? They're mutually compatible. It's two separate people. One happens to be a short-term worker, one a long-term worker. So it's physically possible, right? So now, the Chinam Yikos of Rachmana Toshav. So now, let's say you'll ask like this. So why doesn't the Torah actually, state it clearly? Toshav Nirtza. Nirtza. Straight out, without any ambiguity. A fellow whose, earlobe was bored, basically he's a permanent member of the household. He's an Evet staying till Yovel. Lo Yochel, he can't have Truma. So, perhaps that should be sufficient. And once you know that, you automatically know that a short-term worker will not have truma. If even a long-term can't, even certainly a short-term, right? So it's like a kavachaymer. One can be derived from the other, a short-term from the long-term. But it's true. That's a good point. But you know what? It can still work. Meaning, even if the Torah would actually state clearly, straight out, what a toshav means. A toshav means a nirtz, a long-term fellow. He can have not have truma, lo yochel. And then the Torah would actually go and repeat again. You should know, not only him, even a short-term fellow, a temporary worker. And then it would say that a short-term worker cannot have truma. It's not really a straight-out redundancy, because we find that the Torah does that sometimes. Itemizes things, lists things clearly, even though you can perhaps use your imagination and we'll learn one from the other. So, have a sacher. So adding the concept that a sacher, a short-term worker, will not have truma, even though it can be learned from the long-term worker, that's a milsa da'aseh b'kal. It's an item, a halacha that can be derived from a kal v'chomer. Umilsa da'aseh b'kal. Sometimes we find that even things that can be learned from a kal v'chomer, torach, v'kasav l'kra, the Torah does put in the effort to express it and itemize it, even though it's not necessarily necessary. Okay, so basically, it works. The Torah says Toshav, and Toshav says, and then it says Sachir. Inevitably, one is a long term, one is a short term. So we need both, because otherwise you wouldn't know which one is what. And and even though you would have a question now, okay, so let the Torah just be clear. The long term doesn't have a truma, and then of course the short term doesn't. Why does it have to go and say it this way? It can just say it clearly and in short form. But like we said, the Torah sometimes expresses things and itemizes things clearly. But the bottom line is, you see, there it's totally different than our sugya. There we're speaking about two individuals, two people who could both exist at the same time. So there's a point in mentioning both. But in our case, we're talking about one maidservant, one Amma Ha'ivriya. Either she leaves at 12 or at 12 and a half. You can't have both. Elahacha, chad gufahi, it's one person. Kinavka lebenaris, once she leaves, when she turns 12, b'bagrus my boy gabe, what's she doing there at 12 and a half? So how could the same pasuk be speaking about two cases that are mutually exclusive? Elam Rabbi says, Abaye, I'll tell you the pshat in the pasuk. V'yotzachinam, 1, ein kasef, 2, it's going on as follows. L'nitrucha, it's coming to teach you a little beggar the islanders. Now, this is an isha who was experiencing a severe hormonal imbalance. So she doesn't necessarily experience adulthood when your ordinary woman does at 12 or 12 and a half. She doesn't show these signs of adulthood. And the chiddush will be that she can also leave. She can also go free at a certain point. And Rashi says when she turns 20. 20 is, past teenagehood. You're certainly a confirmed adult, even though you're not exhibiting physical signs of adulthood. Right? So 20, you're out of the woods. And that's why we need this repetition. One is to tell you that a typical girl goes out when she's a nara, but a islandess has to wait until she's 20, but then she's also eligible for freedom. Perhaps I would say, Benaras tepuk, only when she's a nara she can leave. Bebagros like tepuk. There's no concept of leaving as a begeres, such as an islandess who only has bagros, doesn't have naras. That's why we need the extra pasuk. We don't need an extra pasuk for that. That can be learned through a kal v'chomer. There's no need for a pasuk. Look, umas simanan. Since even physical signs of maturity, the pubic hairs, etc. She'em moitzin m'rishus av. When a isha has that experience, she's not going to totally leave her father's domain. We learned this before, that the earnings of the nara will go to her father until she becomes a begeres. She's still in his rishus. She'em moitzin m'rishus av. Still, these same simanan, this same stage, affects her freedom regarding the adain, the master, slave master. She happens to be sold, she turns nara, she goes out. Certainly bagrus, the next stage of adulthood, 12 and a half, which totally frees her from her father, so to speak. Now she earns whatever, she keeps her earnings, etc. Isn't it obvious that it should have the same effect and allow her to go free from her slave master? So it's pretty clear that bagrus can set her free. We don't need a pasuk that an islandess needs to wait until. We know that a begeres goes free. I'll tell you what the extra pasuk is for. It's needed to tell you that you can actually sell an islandess. So the pasuk allows a father to be moicheres bitay le'ama. What if she's an islandess who can never become a nara, doesn't have these simani gadlus? Perhaps I would say you can't sell her. The asya simani naras havazvina. Only a girl who can potentially exhibit signs of na'aras, she is eligible for sale, because the pasuk says you can sell her, and then when she becomes a na'ara, she goes free. Only somebody that has that option can be sold. But Deloy asks you Simone Naris, but suppose she's an islandess who never exhibits those signs of maturity. Have a Zvina. So perhaps you can't even sell her to begin with. Kamashmon, that's what the pasuk is telling you. Yeah. That she's also eligible for becoming an Amma Ivriya. V'yatzachinam. So Yatzachinam is telling you that even an islandess who only has one option to leave when she's a begerish, doesn't have the concept of Simone Narus, you can also sell her as an Amma. Now, you know, we have one more kasha here. Mamar Rav Ashi just told us. He asked on Abaye. No, the pasuk is not coming to tell you for that, tell you that halacha, because that can be learned from a kavachomer. Rather, it's coming to tell you my halacha. Now, the Amma Vav Kavachomer, he's asking based on the kavachomer, why do we need a pasuk? We just said a minute ago, and this is a general, universal concept. Sometimes even thing that can be learned from a kavachomer is still mentioned in the pasuk. So what was Mamar Rav Ashi's kasha on Abaye, which sought to prove that Abaye's halacha cannot be sourced in this pasuk? It can be learned from a kavachomer. Well, so what? Even so, perhaps the pasuk is just telling us something, even though it's obvious. The answer is like this: when do we say this formula that something that can be learned from kavachomer can be specified in a pasuk? When there's no other option to explain why the pasuk repeated it, so we say, okay, Torah sought to repeat something obvious. But if we have another option, another way out, we opt for that option. So that's why Rav Ashi preferred his approach. I'll introduce a new thing to you, a new halacha, a new twist, which has not been learned from a kavachomer. Rather, it explains the necessity of the repetition in the pasuk. Okay, before we continue, we have the pasuk v'yatzachinim and kasef. Why the repetition? So initially we figured one is to tell you she leaves at 12, one at 12 and a half. Well, the kasha on that was she's out at 12, she's not here at 12 and a half. So Abaye says, well, it's coming to tell you that even an islandess who doesn't become a Nara will leave her master when she becomes 20. Rav Ashi asked on that, it's the localfile. It's pretty clear, we don't need a pasuk. Rather, according to him, the extra pasuk is telling you can actually sell an islandess even though she doesn't have potential to bear simone naras. Now, actually, how did this whole sugya come into being? Because we brought the pasuk Yatzichin men kasev to tell you that this is where we learn the din that you can be mekadosh an isha with kesef. And the conclusion was it's because of the yud. Yotzachinim ein kasev, the extra yud tells you that there's no money changing hands when she leaves her master, but there is money for another master, another boss, i.e., the kiddushin money given to her father upon her engagement. So that provides one source. Vetana ma'isla mehacha, says the Gemara. There's another bride, so it's another Tana who has an alternate source for kiddushay kesef. How do we know we makadosh isha was kesef? The son. Kikachish isha ba'alav hayim l'sim zachen be'enav kimatzav erev davar, and he divorces her. Apparently, until that point, she belongs to him, so to speak. She's married to him. How? What means were used to be makadosh to isha? Ein kicha, kikachish isha ein kicha ela bekesef denotes money. As we buy a field, we connect kikach to kach. Just like in that story, there was money changing hands. Likewise, you can be mekadosh an isha. You can acquire an isha with kesef. Why do we need a pasuk? We have a kavachomer. V'aleidinu uma amaha ivri, a Jewish maidservant. She'eina niknas with bia. You can't acquire her with the bia method by spending time physically with her owner. It's not applicable over there. Still, even though she doesn't have that element, niknas bekesef, you can purchase her using money. Rashi brings the pasuk bekesef miknasa. So there's no bia, but there is kesef. Certainly, the ordinary isha, the ordinary wife, zusha niknas bia, you can acquire her through bia, as the Gemara soon will teach us. Ein adin, doesn't it lend to reason that shetikana bekesef, that you can use kesef to make the kinyan? Why do we need a pasuk? Well, says the Gemara, Yivama teichech. We look at Yivama, at Yivam, that's going to undo our source, our kavachomer, our potential source. Why? Because in Yivama we find that it has bia and no kesef. Sheniknas with bia, ve'en niknas bekesef. How does one acquire a Yivam? How does one do Yivam? By spending time with her physically as married, not through kesef. So perhaps an ordinary isha as well, even though she has the bia advantage, doesn't say anything regarding her ability to be purchased with kesef. Says the Gemara, 1 second, Yivama doesn't show anything. Yivama is not an indication. That's not a fair matchup. Ma'ili Yivama shekain iniknas b'shtar. Perhaps you know why Kesef doesn't apply to Yivama, because she doesn't have the shtar potential. You can't acquire the Yivama with shtar. Toimer Bazu, as opposed to ordinary wife, sheniknas b'shtar, you can use shtar to do the Kiddushin. So perhaps you can do Kesef as well. Tamar Loimar, Kikach Ish, that's why we have the pasuk, Kikach Ish, to tell you that Kesef work. What do you mean? We just had a Kal V'Chayma, which was, solidified. We don't need a pasuk. We had a Kal V'Chayma. Amar of Ashi, well, the Kal V'Chayma doesn't really hold water. Misham D'ikal, remember, there's another way to refute the Kal V'Chayma. Mikar the Dina. Let's go back to the initial stage, the initial step of the Kal V'Chayma. Pirchem will refute it from there. Where were you coming from? Just like an Amma Ivriya, which has no Bia, has Kesef. Certainly by us, there is Bia, there is Kesef. Well, there is distinction. There's room for separation between the two. Perhaps the reason why you can acquire an Amma Ivriya with Kesef is because she can go free with Kesef. Rashi brings that, any time throughout the 6 years, the Amma Ivriya can walk over to her master and say, look, I got to hold some funds. Here, I'm redeeming myself. So perhaps, if Kesef can accomplish freedom, it can accomplish acquisition. She's like an item, so to speak, like a chayfetz. It's a totally different system. Money on the way in, money on the way out. It makes sense. Tamer Bazu, as opposed to an ordinary wife, she'eno yoytze bekesef. Money doesn't affect separation. You can't divorce with money. As we're going to see later on, it says sefer krisis. Only a sefer, a document, can accomplish that termination, but not money. So perhaps you cannot do kiddushin with money either. That's why we need that pasuk Gikach Ish. With that zera shava to purchasing a field, money accomplishes kiddushin. Now, it turns out we have two drashas, two sources for kinyan kesef, for kiddushin kesef. One is Gikach Ish with the zera shava, and one is the earlier pasuk v'yatzachinim in kesef. Why do we need two? There is a reason. V'yitzrach l'michtav v'yatzachinam. We need that pasuk. V'yitzrach l'michtav Gikach Ish. Why both? Dikas rachmana Gikach. If only the second pasuk. I would say kiddushin. The Yahav Labal, the Dahavu. Okay, we can use, money, but who says the money goes to her father if she's still young in age? That's what the pasuk uses. The Torah uses the other pasuk to teach us as well. Not only does money accomplish kedushin, but it goes to her father, as we explained before. If only that pasuk, I would say, Heicha de Yava lay. Oh, listen to this. Let's say she takes the money or the ring and gives it to him as a kiddushin. She takes her funds and gives it to the husband. Instead of the husband giving it to the wife, she gives him the money to make the kiddushin. And she's mekadesh him. Rashi says she gives him kesef, and she tells him his kadesh li. Why not? Just like he can be mekadesh her, maybe she can be mekadesh him, and it works. Have a kiddushin, maybe it works. Because Rachman the pasuk says no. Kikach says, Kikach Ish, he's the one acquiring, he's the one attaining the wife. Veliki Sikach, as opposed to she doing it, doesn't work. So that's why we need two psukim, each one with its own message. The Brisa continues. So we know that Kesef is koine. What about Bia? Uba'ala, that's the next part of that pasuk. Malamish Nixon Bia, we see that Bia works as well and accomplishes Kiddushin. Validinu, well, why need a pasuk? We have a Kal V'Chayma to teach us the same. Uma Yevama she'ei niknas bekesef. Yevama. Well, Kesef doesn't apply there. Niknas Bia does. Zusha niknas bekesef. If Kesef works by an ordinary isha, Eino Din does not lend to reason. Sheniknas Bia works as well. Why need a pasuk? Well, says the Gemara, we find elsewhere that the two things aren't necessarily connected. You find them, for instance, in Amha Ivriya, right? Techich, that will disprove this formula. Sheniknas bekesef. Although you can acquire her with money, very niknas Bia not applicable to an Amha Ivriya, right? So perhaps an ordinary wife as well. Even if Kesef works, who says Bia works? Well, says the Gemara, you can't connect an Isha to an Amma Ivriya, which is not a marriage-related relationship. Ma Amma Ivriya, well, that's totally different. She'en kinyan l'shem Isha, it's not a marriage-related kinyan. Therefore, says Rashi, Elkach le'shaycha beBia, it's totally inapplicable there. As opposed to an ordinary wife, Temer Bezu, it's totally different. She'kinyan l'shem Isha, it's a marriage-related acquisition, so perhaps it makes sense that Bia would work. So if kesef works, certainly bia. Tamalema, that's when we need the pasuk go bala. Yes, spending time physically as married accomplishes that kinyan. Well, 1 second. We had a kavachaymer. Why do we need a pasuk? We've substantiated the kavachaymer. We already have the source for bia. Amar v'ashi, very similar to before. It's not so clear that the kavachaymer would work. If we go back to the initial stage of this kavachaymer, we can sort of refute it. Where were you coming from? Yavam. If kesef doesn't apply to Yavama and Bia does, certainly an ordinary Isha where Kesef applies, Bia will certainly apply. Well, there's room for distinction. Yavama will not provide a source. Mal Yavama sheken skukavay medes. You know, Yivam is a very unique process. She's already sort of bound to the Yavam. She's halfway in. She's 1 foot in because the Yavam is simply taking over the marriage of his brother. And therefore it makes sense that Bia would work. He's just sort of completing the process. Tomer Bezu, as opposed to be Mekadosh, a total stranger. She's not bound to him. She's not, partially connected to him. So who says the Bia would work? Tamalim Bala, that's when we need the pasuk of Bala. Yes. You could be kinda an Isha with Kesef, and you could be kinda Isha with Bia as well. And tomorrow we'll deal with the third kinyan, which is Shtar, and learn the source for that. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.